The Trump administration will lower its reciprocal tariffs on South Korea to 15% from the proposed 25%, in return for $450 billion worth of investments in the U.S., with shipbuilding being at the heart of the project. And U.S. President Donald Trump says he and President Lee Jae-myung will meet at the White House within the next 2 weeks, in what will be their first one-on-one meeting since Lee took office last month. Seoul City saw 22 tropical nights in July alone, the most ever recorded in the month of July. The extreme heat is expected to linger into August. We begin with the tariff deal sealed between South Korea and the U.S. Reciprocal tariffs have been set at 15% for South Korea in exchange for the country's billions of dollars worth of investment in the U.S. Our Park Jun-an starts us off.
South Korea and the U.S. announced a major tariff agreement on Wednesday local time to lower reciprocal tariffs from 25% to 15%. The deal, however, required South Korea to commit to a $350 billion investment package. The $350 billion will be in the form of an investment vehicle and will be spent through equity investments, loans, and credit guarantees. An additional $100 billion will be spent on purchasing U.S. energy, mostly liquefied natural gas. The South Korean government said sector-specific tariffs involving semiconductors and pharmaceuticals are guaranteed most favored nation status, ensuring treatment as favorable as that afforded to other nations.
So we've made sure that if we face tariffs in the future on things like semiconductors or pharmaceuticals, we'll receive the same treatment as most favored nation level, ensuring we're not at a disadvantage compared to other countries' agreements.
Through the deal, tariffs on automobiles have also been reduced from the current 25% to 15%. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance Koo Yoon-chul commented after the agreement that South Korea's shipbuilding project, which involves large-scale investments by South Korean private shipbuilders in the U.S., played a key role in the tariff negotiations.
The most noble part of today's agreement is the $150 billion South Korea-U.S. shipbuilding cooperation package, a project called Make American Shipbuilding Great Again.
This agreement will fund new U.S. shipyard construction, workforce training, supply chain rebuilding, and ship maintenance, leveraging South Korea's shipbuilding expertise. The remaining $200 billion will be spent to support strategic sectors that are closely related to the country's economic security. Those sectors include semiconductors, batteries, nuclear energy, biotechnology, and critical minerals. South Korea also pledged to purchase $100 billion worth of U.S. energy, primarily liquefied natural gas, over 4 years, redirecting existing import needs without any added economic burden. The last-minute tariffs agreement has reduced uncertainty for South Korean companies, which account for 19% of the country's global exports, ensuring they compete on equal or better terms than their rivals. Further details about the deal will be finalized in ongoing talks. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
And now let us break this down and touch on the important aspects of this trade deal. We have our Kim Do-yeon here in the studio with us. Hello, Do-yeon.
Good to be here.
So, Do-yeon, what a buildup of a couple of weeks to this point, but officials say it's not done. What does that mean?
That's right. I mean, the dust is settling, and we now know a 15% tariff will apply, but as you mentioned, it's not over. Negotiations may be done for now, but the broader fight over tariffs and the investment details is far from settled. First, here's what the Deputy Prime Minister, Koo Yoon-chul, who led the negotiations in Washington, had to say.
A 15% tariff is undoubtedly challenging, especially for a country that has a free trade agreement with the U.S. But if our companies can leverage their creativity and competitiveness, this could turn into a new opportunity. While the broader agreement is done, we will continue to work out the specifics through further talks with the U.S.
Still, at least for now, the agreement was welcomed by Korea's 6 largest business groups, including the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Korea Enterprises Federation. They issued a joint statement backing the outcome, noting that the focus areas for investment, shipbuilding, semiconductors, batteries, and bio are strategic industries where Korea holds global competitiveness. Their hope, this will help Korean firms gain more market share in the U.S.
I see, Doyeon, we have to talk about the Mascot project and also another $200 billion investment in the U.S. Let's cut to the chase. Is this a good deal?
To answer that, let's look at how the government frames it, especially in contrast to Japan, Korea's biggest competitor in the U.S. market. Japan recently pledged a $550 billion investment in return for a similar tariff deal.
South Korea has a trade surplus of $66 billion with the U.S., while Japan's is around $68.5 billion. Yet our total investment fund is smaller. If we exclude the $150 billion led by our own companies, our actual contribution is $200 billion, just 36% the size of Japan's.
Now that $150 billion refers to MASCA, a South Korea-led shipbuilding initiative seen as a cornerstone of this agreement. The rest of $200 billion will be largely controlled by the U.S. Seoul has been keen to highlight this structure to draw a distinction from Japan's pledge. Japan's $550 billion investment is like Korea's $200 billion investment, with U.S. leading it. President Trump, after Japan's deal announcement, said 90% of the profits go to the U.S.
But Doyeon, in terms of tariff rates, South Korea enjoyed no tariffs so far, but it's now at the same level as Japan. What do we say? What do you have to say about that?
That's right. I mean, some may say all the investment but higher tariffs, but the FTA era is largely seen as over by many experts, and expecting to keep no tariffs was really a big hope. So the playing field might be leveled right now, and Korean industries will need to work on this going forward. Take a listen to an expert.
The real game has now started. This is because we only have the framework and a brief agreement. There isn't a detailed plan out there. Will this deal impact South Korea positively and lead to a boost in the domestic economy? That's the bigger issue.
But to highlight companies that will be impacted, it's the automakers. When it comes to cars, an industry with fierce competition, while Korean cars were tariff-free, their competitors, Japan and the EU, paid 2.5%. Now, that advantage has disappeared, leveling the playing field in terms of price competitiveness.
Doyeon, I also have to point out how the deal came just 2 days before the hefty duties, were supposed to kick in. But now, tell us about the pressure and also the tactics that Korean officials used that we know so far.
That's right. South Korea, as one of the major trade partners with the U.S., was actually one of the last ones to finalize this deal. Having said that, the new administration only kicked off last month, and it needed some time to finalize the cabinet to form this trade delegation. And when that was started, the discussions with the U.S. and even within the Korean government weren't so easy.
They brought up various issues, things like the age limit for cattle and rice, which are already well-known points of contention. Naturally, there were heated exchanges. Even within our own government, when discussing negotiation strategies, there were raised voices between ministries.
Now, agriculture and livestock market access was a contentious issue, but was not included in the deal despite strong pressure from the U.S. There were concerns for Korean farmers leading up to the negotiations as well. Officials revealed that during negotiations, they presented a photo from the 2008 mass protests in South Korea against U.S. beef imports, which drew over 10 million demonstrators, reminding U.S. officials it's a red line for them. On another side note, while President Trump did not meet with any other trade delegations, he made time to meet with South Korean officials. He later said this was a sign of his respect for South Korea.
All right, relief for now, but lots of hurdles and challenges to tackle in the coming weeks and months. Doyeon, thanks so much for the coverage tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And South Korean President Lee Jae-myung notes that the trade deal with the U.S. has eliminated export uncertainties. With this, a South Korea-U.S. summit is picking up speed, which is set to take place within 2 weeks. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jang-min reports.
Uncertainties in export conditions have been substantially eliminated, and South Korea has crossed a major hurdle. That was the assessment made by President Lee Jae-myung of the U.S. trade deal, as he noted the need to navigate an international trade order that's being reorganized.
국익 중심의 유연한 실용 외교를 통해서 급변하는 대외 환경의 파고를 슬기롭게 넘어가야 될 것입니다.
Presiding over a weekly meeting with his aides on Thursday, the president instructed the officials to fully prepare for follow-up measures, as well as long-term tasks such as expanding consumption at home and diversifying export markets. With a major diplomatic challenge somewhat removed, summit diplomacy between South Korea and the U.S. is expected to pick up speed, which has been stalled since President Lee Jae-myung took office in June. The first E-Trump summit is expected within 2 weeks.
I heard President Trump ask Secretary Rubio to set a date for next week, but considering schedules, it'll take place within 2 weeks.
Details of the summit, including the date, could be discussed when South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun meets his U.S. counterpart Marco Rubio in Washington on Thursday local time. The summit agenda is expected to include setting out details of the deal's framework. Security issues such as the allies' defense cost-sharing and purchasing U.S.-made weapons were not addressed this time, but could be brought up when the two leaders meet. Earlier in the day, South Korea's Defense Minister An Gyubek spoke over the phone with U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, where they agreed to modernize the alliance and expand cooperation in shipbuilding. All this as the South Korea leader says he expects Seoul and Washington to further strengthen their economic cooperation and alliance. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And rival parties in the National Assembly are poles apart on the U.S. trade deal. The ruling Democratic Party welcomed the agreement, calling it the result of a firm defense of national interest and a valuable achievement of President Yee's pragmatic diplomacy. Floor Leader Kim Byung-gi said Thursday that the deal would further strengthen the bilateral alliance and industrial ties. The main opposition People Power Party expressed a concern that Korea may have conceded too much, while acknowledging that the 15% tariff rate was reasonable. PPP Floor Leader Song Won-seok pointed out that the pledged investments in and imports from the U.S. are excessive, surpassing the country's foreign exchange reserves. Hot weather here in Korea isn't just a daytime issue as it lingers well into the night. As Seoul City experienced 22 tropical nights this July alone, the most for the month in 117 years. Our Park Kwon-woo has more.
Seoul's summer nights continue to stay hot and longer than usual. At least 22 tropical nights were recorded in Seoul this July. That's the longest period for the month in 117 years, since related data first began to be compiled in 1908. A tropical night refers to when the overnight low, between 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. the next day, does not drop below 25 degrees Celsius. The previous record for the longest stretch of tropical nights in July was set in 1994 with 21. But with one more day left till August in Korea, this year's record may climb further. Adding to the heat, Seoul also logged its highest ever overnight low for July on Wednesday into Thursday at 29.3 degrees. The previous was 29.2 degrees 7 years ago, according to the Korea Meteorological Administration.
The Tibetan and North Pacific high-pressure systems have overlapped over Korea, trapping heat in the atmosphere. Hot, humid air from the south is also being drawn in, while intense sunlight continues, making scorching days and tropical nights persist.
Asked whether this trend may continue due to climate change, the KMA said it's hard to predict, as tropical nights are largely driven by variables, including complex pressure patterns in the atmosphere. Still, the weather agency forecasts tropical nights to continue for the time being, although some rain is expected after August 6. The authorities are advising people to take precautions against heat-related illnesses, including keeping indoor temperatures and humidity moderate, ensuring proper ventilation, staying hydrated, and doing light exercises before bed for a good night's sleep. 박건우, Arirang News.
According to data released by Statistics Korea on Thursday, South Korea's industrial output rebounded in June for the first time in 3 months. This was largely thanks to strong performances in the semiconductor and automobile sectors. Consumer spending also turned upward for the first time in 4 months, with increased sales of clothing and cosmetics. However, facility investment fell for the 4th consecutive month due to a decline in transportation equipment investment, marking the longest downturn in 7 years. Now, overall, the all-industry production index for June stood at 113.8, an increase of 1.2% from the previous month. Samsung Electronics on Thursday reported a second quarter operating profit of $3.4 billion. That's a 55% plunge from a year ago and over 21% lower than market expectations. In its regulatory filing, the company also recorded a net income of 5.1 trillion won, which marks a 48% drop on year. This was largely due to sluggish demand for high bandwidth memory chips. The semiconductor division posted an operating profit of only 400 billion won, which is the lowest since the 4th quarter of 2023. However, despite weak profits, overall chip sales climbed 11% on year, driven by demand for premium server chips and increased foundry orders. Also today, the government unveiled its 2025 tax reform framework, aiming to both rebuild the nation's weakened revenue base for fiscal sustainability and also support economic growth and livelihoods. Our finance correspondent Moon Ji-young explains.
The 2025 tax reform bill introduces a mix of targeted tax credits for strategic industries and welfare, alongside adjustments to corporate and capital gains taxes.
Over the past 3 years, our tax revenue base has weakened rapidly, leading to a significant drop in the tax burden ratio. Therefore, this year's tax reform bill prioritizes reinforcing the weakened tax revenue base for fiscal sustainability, while also supporting economic strength and stabilizing people's livelihoods.
The reform package aims to enhance tax credits for R&D and investment in future strategic industries, including AI. Furthermore, to enhance K-content competitiveness, tax credits for webtoons will be newly introduced and tax support for video content creation will be expanded. Beyond these targeted incentives, the framework includes tax cuts designed to encourage corporate payouts and boost the stock market. Specifically, to encourage high dividends, a separate taxation system for dividend income from high dividend companies is being introduced. This approach excludes these dividends from the comprehensive financial income tax base, allowing earnings from stock dividends to be taxed independently rather than combined with other income. Despite the debate over tax cuts for the super-rich, a 35% tax rate is expected to be applied to the highest dividend income bracket. On the other hand, the bill aims to restore tax equity and rebuild the nation's revenue base based on the principle of ability to pay. The country's corporate tax rate will be raised by 1 percentage point across the board, with the top corporate rate increasing to 25%, effectively reversing a cut introduced by the previous administration. The bill also tightens capital gains tax rules by lowering the threshold for major shareholders. While currently only those holding 5 billion won, or roughly $3.6 million in a single listed stock are taxed, that threshold will be reduced to 1 billion won, or just under $720,000. Tax support will be expanded for low and middle income households, with measures such as an increase in the income deduction limit for credit card use by up to 500,000 won, or roughly $360, depending on the number of children for families. The tax burden on self-employed individuals and small business owners is also expected to be alleviated. The bill will first go through cabinet meetings before being submitted to the National Assembly for final approval. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Another shooting took place in Gaza as people queued up for food, leaving at least 48 dead. This comes as Canada has outspokenly stated its intentions to formally recognize the State of Palestine. Our An Sung-jin has the details.
Canada says it plans to join several countries in formally recognizing Palestine as a state. According to Prime Minister Mark Carney during a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, Canada intends to do so at a meeting of the UN General Assembly in September this year, as long as preconditions are met.
This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state.
Canada also signed the New York Call, a joint statement of the ministers of foreign affairs from 15 countries, including Australia, France, and Spain, that calls for an immediate ceasefire, release of hostages, and a two-state solution where Israel and Palestine live within secure and recognized borders. Conditions in Gaza remain dire. Israeli soldiers reportedly killed at least 48 Palestinians. According to Associated Press on Wednesday, IDF soldiers opened fire on a crowd at a key gateway for aid trucks at a checkpoint in the north of the Strip. This incident comes as Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, is headed to Israel for talks on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. UN agencies have repeatedly stated that the population has already exceeded the threshold for famine in the Gaza Strip. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Searing heat continues to grip the entire nation. Tomorrow brings more of the same, scorching sun, sweltering air, and no sign of relief just yet. The extreme heat will persist with daytime temperatures once again reaching above 35 degrees Celsius in most parts. Many of us in the capital area felt relief today thanks to that cloud coverage. But there will be nothing but sunshine tomorrow with very strong UV rays nationwide. Then brace for another sweaty night. And it looks like here in the capital area is having the roughest summer this year with a low of 28 degrees Celsius here in the capital, Daegu, Gyeongju, starting off the day at 24 degrees. Then by the afternoon, most parts will see highs soaring to 36 degrees Celsius. The intense heat is here to stay. Then around the middle of next week, rainfall in the central regions may help to ease the extreme heat that's gripped the nation for weeks. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for this hour. We'll be back in a moment with a panel discussion.